Hey, Alistair. All right, here everybody comes. Good to see you all today. How are you? Wonderful. Look at that landscape that Mohammed has as the background. That's beautiful. Did you draw that, Mohammed?
No.
No. I know some of you guys are artists. I've already seen a little bit of artwork from a few of you. All right, it's great to see anyone. Anybody have any questions for me? Anything you're working on that you want more detail about? Finished up week 2 last week. Seemed like the school year's going well so far. All right, for the most part, it doesn't seem like there have been any major problems, so I'm happy to hear that. All right, let's see here at the chat. There's oh, Alistair, that's not good news. Alistair's not feeling well today. Oh well. Happens to all of us, right? Live in a world filled with tiny little microorganisms that are always looking to find a way in. Fortunately, we have a lot of defenses that prevent them from getting in most of the time. We'll learn a lot about that when we study about bacteria and viruses. And when we get to the end of the year and we learn about human biology, we'll learn a lot about the defenses that we have against all of them. All right, if nobody has any questions, let's go ahead and get started with class today. Everybody can see where it says welcome there, a little party, right? All right, so what we're going to talk about today are cells. Now, we're going to be learning about cells in the next week. What do you already know? Tell me just something that you know. When you see the word cells, tell me something that you think of that you already know about them. Nothing? Mohammed?
It's like basically cells and make organelles.
Cells have organelles inside them. Yep. Cells and organelles definitely go together. What else? What is a cell? They are in every living thing. Yep, you got it. That's a really important one. An egg is one cell. That's right. Egg is one of the larger cells that we have. So when you're looking at a chicken egg, think about that. You're looking at a cell. Pretty cool, isn't it? All right, well, let's talk about cells then. We know that living things are made of them because Hannah told us that they are. Now, the smallest unit of an organism that's alive is what we call a cell. It's the smallest thing. So humans have about, so we'll talk about how many different size humans have, but somewhere in the neighborhood 100 trillion. Now, imagine if you had $1 million. Okay, you've got 1 million. Now, everyone in your town now imagine that your town also had 1 million people in it. And every one of those people in your town had $1 million, right? So you got 1 million people, they all have $1 million. That's 1 trillion. That's how big that is. Now, imagine that all the people that were in, say, maybe the state of California, which is a big one, and I know some of you guys live there. If you imagine that each of them had $1 million, that's still only 39 trillion. Okay, that gives you the idea of what 100 trillion looks like, of how big 100 trillion are. And we're going to talk about cells today and then in a couple of lessons this week. But as always, I have a little bit of housekeeping that we have to do, a little business before we get there. I want to remind you guys, please, when you write to me through Canvas inbox, give me the name of the lesson, the question number, and as many details as you can to help me help you quickly. If you just say to me, the video in the lesson isn't working, then I have to write back and say what lesson and which video. You understand? Give me the name of the lesson, say the video that's right under the paragraph that says this, and then I can help you as quickly as I can. All right, I need to make sure I have everybody's attention because this next one is really, really important. do not use the grades feature to find the work that you have to do, the assignments. I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to drag in this right here. So this is what it looks like from a student's perspective. This is what you see when you log on to Zoology. Right here, you can click on grades. Now, this is just a fake account, so there won't be any work done on this one. You'll see missing, 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 because this is just a fake student that I have. So right here, if you look here and see, oh, I'm looking for ones that are missing, you're going to miss some lessons. They're not all listed here. The only ones that are listed here are the ones that actually have a point value associated with them. So let me show you what I mean now. What I want you to do instead is either click here where it says modules, or from the home page, I want you to click here where it says assignments. This is the best thing to do to find what you have to do. Assignments is every single thing and nothing extra. Grades might have some extra things in there that I just haven't deleted yet. Might say the word delete. If you ever see that, just ignore it. Sometimes when a teacher has to delete a lesson, like if I make a new one and I delete an old one, it doesn't take it off of there right away. It could be on there for a while before it deletes it. So go to where it says modules or the little assignments link and come all the way down. So when you're looking right here, here's an example. See this one, 2-1 animal classification part 1? There's 0 point value for that one. That one might not show up when it's in the grades list, but it will show up here on the assignments page. So please, please, please do not use where it says grades in order to find your assignments. Instead, click on that little icon. It looks like a newspaper that says assignments. Okay, anybody understand? Anybody not understand that? What I mean? That's important. I don't want you skipping assignments, or what you'll be skipping is the explanation that you need in order to answer the quiz. That's what you'll be skipping. All right. The next thing, you may have noticed that there is a meeting summary. So again, I'm going to drag this in so you can see this. Right here on this page where this is the home page, where it says click here for class recordings. If you click right there, you can always see the recordings of any classes that we do here, these live ones. So here, you guys are Monday. Here's the recording for Monday, or for the first one that we did on August 26th. This is the one we did last week on September 2nd. The title of it was What is Science? You can click here and watch it right here, or you can click here and go to YouTube. But see that where it says meeting summary? This is pretty cool. So AI in Zoom has started putting together a meeting summary. You can just scan through this. If you think, oh, I can't remember, we talked about something and I want to tell my sister about it or tell my parents about it, you can scan through this meeting summary. Now, there are some things that are wrong in this. This is just AI, and AI is not always correct. One thing that it says that I'll tell you right now, see here where it says, Doctor emphasized the importance of punctuality, importance and proper grammar in class. Look at that. It calls me a he, because in the AI's mind, I guess a doctor is a he. I think that's pretty funny, but there will be some things wrong. So at the bottom, it'll always say here, AI generated content may be inaccurate or misleading. That reminds you, this was made by AI. It might not be exactly accurate, but it's a nice tool for you to be able to just take a look. So all of our live classes all have the meeting summary at the bottom, right underneath it in that icon. All right, another reminder, please, please, please make sure that you actually upload the image and not just a link to the image. Not all students can click on those links and open them. Some of them can, but not all. But everybody can see an image. So we're going to be using discussion boards a lot. When I ask you to put an image in, go out after you think you've attached your image, go out of the lesson, go back into it and look and see if there's actually a picture there. If there's not a picture, then other students won't be able to see it at all. All right, any questions? That's the end of the business end of things. And now, without further ado, we have some jokes. All right, did you know there's a species of antelope capable of jumping higher than the average house? This is due to its powerful hind legs and the fact that the average house cannot jump. All right. But first, yeah, that's spelled wrong, isn't it? I did it on purpose. Okay, here, how about this one? How do you wrap a present for a cloud? Surely somebody's heard of this one. How do you wrap a present for a cloud? With a rainbow. Yeah, and this one. What do you call a pod of musical whales? This is for the musicians among you. What do you call a pod of musical whales? An orchestra. Somebody's got to laugh. At least one of these has to be funny. All right. I tried to catch some fog, but I missed. And we did the scientific method last week, right? Here is the scientific method. Who's a good boy? Does some experiments. The results are in. It's me. And since we're going to be learning about cells today, I thought you might like some cell jokes. So what's a biologist's favorite thing to do? Take selfies. How did the nucleus communicate with the cell membrane? With a cell phone. And the last one, what did the science teacher say to the students in her class? If the cell in your hand does not contain cytoplasm, please put it away. All right, let's do a couple of let's get acquainted questions again. Now type your answer into the chat box. This way we can get to know each other just a little bit and have a little fun at the beginning of class too. So type your answer in the chat box using just one or maybe two words, just a couple words. What's the weirdest food you've ever eaten? What's the weirdest food you've ever eaten? Snail? Moki? Lemon hearts. What's a lemon heart, Beth? Like a piece of candy?
It's like an edible leaf you can find outside.
Oh, airplane food. Yeah, airplane food. Octopus. I've had octopus too. I've had canned octopus. You open the can and you see the tentacles with the little suckers on them. Yeah, a little strange. Snail, durian. Durian is delicious, but smells horrible. It's kind of a fruit. I think it's a fruit. Squid.
I liked it, but it smelled way too bad.
It does. It smells so bad. It's hard to get over the smell. But if you can get over the smell, the taste is good. Isn't that funny? Grasshopper, Alistair. Yeah, I've had ants and earthworms in recipes before. Those are really weird. Dragon fruit. I love dragon fruit. Dragon fruit is gives a beautiful color to things. All right, here's another question for you. What crazy activity do you dream of trying someday? I want to jump out of an airplane. I would love to skydive. Yeah, Mohammed too. Parachuting, yep. Skydiving. Yeah, it is kind of crazy, but I think it would be fun. Parasailing, yeah, that's fun too. Wakeboarding. All right, next question. Climbing a mountain, I like that too. How about this one? What two things do you consider yourself to be very good at? What do you think you're very good at? Tennis and baking. Activities and providing for your family in a way of delicious way. That's pretty cool. Art and taming animals. Ooh, Felicity. Math and tennis. What kind of animals do you tame, Felicity? Sleeping. We're all good at sleeping, right? That's a good one to be good at. Math and living, art and math. Calming toddlers down. Wow, Beth, what a skill that is. Walking, that's a good one too. Trumpet and writing. Oh, trumpet. That takes a big lung capacity, Daniel. Got to be able to hold your breath for a long time to play the trumpet. All right, here's another question for you. What two things do you consider yourself to be very bad at? What do you think you're very bad at? All right, all right. I don't think so, Kian. You're good at living just because you're here, right? Spelling. Spelling's not the easiest. Boy, in English words especially, we have so many rules. Writing, calligraphy, and staying awake for 15 hours. Wow. Why would you have to do that? Hopefully you never have to stay awake for that long. Handwriting. Well, 15 hours, that's not too many. That's pretty normal. Actually, we're usually awake for about 16. Writing and baking. All right. Being patient with my brothers. Yeah. All right. Another question. What is your favorite magical or mythical creature? What is your favorite? Mine would be the unicorn. I think it'd be fun to ride a unicorn or a dragon because it would fly. Dragons, yeah. We got a couple of dragons here. A nine-tailed kitsune. I don't even know what that is, Daniel. Is that from a video game? No? All right, we got a few dragons there. Dragon. All right, great. All right, so let's move on and begin to talk about cells today. So why do you think we do it? Why do you think it's important to learn about cells? Why am I doing this? What's the point? There's so little after all. We can't even see them, most of them. So we understand how the body works. Yeah, so imagine being someone whose job it was to build houses, but you didn't know anything about wood or bricks or metal. Imagine if you were a video game designer and you knew nothing about electronics, or somebody who drives a car and doesn't know anything about how a car works. Well, a lot of us are like that. A lot of us drive cars, but we don't know how they work. But imagine if you did. Imagine if you were somebody who both drove a car and knew how it worked. That would be even better. So how much better will we understand ourselves and our bodies if we know what we're made of? Now, the truth is, as you go through your lives, people are going to have to make a lot of decisions that have to do with cell anatomy and physiology. Things like, should we grow organs in a lab that we can then transplant into humans? If we have the ability to grow pigs, to grow a human heart inside a pig, should we do that? What do we need to think about? What if we could modify rice in order to produce vitamin A so that people in countries where they're very poor don't go blind anymore? We'll have to make some of those kind of decisions. And a basic understanding of cell biology and genetics will be really important. So we'll learn about both of those things today. So we're made up of cells. Our whole body is made. Every living thing is made up of at least one cell. A lot of them are made up of more than one cell. So anybody remember how many cells I said a person has? I said that at the very beginning of class.
1 trillion cells.
More than 1 trillion.
39 trillion.
Very close in an adult. So the number is going to vary depending on how big you are and how old you are. Of course, a newborn isn't going to have nearly as many cells as an adult will. But in general, newborns have about 26 billion, but adults have at least 37 trillion. So I've seen that number go up to 100 trillion, depending on what you look at. It's kind of hard to count that high, right? But that's what we think. Of all of those cells in the human body, 80% of them are one specific kind of cell. Anybody have any guess what the most common kind of cell you have 80% of the cells in your body are made of this, are this kind of cell. That's a
Skin
good guess, but no, not a skin cell. You'd think so because the skin is so big and on the outside, but there's something that we have even more of than skin cells. 80% of our cells are these. Yeah, you got it there. Beth has it. Red blood cell. 80% of our cells in our body are red blood cells. Sorry, Hannah, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, I was going to say red blood cells.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So we know that everything that's alive is made of cells. Everything that's alive is made of cells. But how do we know that? How do we know about cells? How do we start learning about cells in the first place if they're too small to even see? What do you think? Muhammad?
Microscope.
Microscope. There you go. We know about cells because of the work of some scientists. So back in the 1500s, so we're talking like 500 years ago now, people learned that if they took lenses like the kind in my glasses and they put two of them together, they could see really, really small things. Now, one of the very first scientists to use a microscope to study things was this guy. His name was Robert Hooke. And when he looked under a microscope at some cork, like the kind that's in on a, you know, a cork board, like a bulletin board that you push pins into, that's made of cork. Also, corks that are in the top of bottles are made of cork. It's from a tree. Well, he looked at a slice, a very thin slice of cork under a microscope, and he saw these little squares. He called them cells. So he was the first one, Robert Hooke, to name a cell a cell. Other scientists then kept on doing his work. And they then went on to discover, these other scientists, that all plants are made of cells and all animals are made of cells. So today we know that all living things are made up of at least one cell. And we know that cells are the basic unit of living things. They are the basic, that like the smallest thing upon which all life is born. Now, another really important scientist is this guy named Antony van Leeuwenhoek. So he built his own microscope after he read Hooke's book. And then he started, so he read about it and then he made his own following Hooke's instructions. And he started looking at really, really tiny things. So he's the first person who saw bacteria when he looked under the microscope. And look at that. That's one cell big. It's a living thing that's only made of one cell. The yeast are one-celled organisms. Amoeba is a one-celled organism. Since they're just made of one cell, they are called unicellular organisms. And of course, the ones that are made of more than one cell are called multicellular organisms. So organisms that are made of more than one cell are multicellular. Organisms that are made of just one are called unicellular. And there you can see some examples of them. So multicellular, obviously, we're multicellular. We're made of lots and lots of different cells, 37 trillion of them in most adults. Unicellular ones would be like the ones I showed you in the picture. And some of these organisms, these unicellular organisms, are so small that we need a microscope to be able to see them. So they're accurately called microorganism. A microorganism is one that is too small to be seen without a microscope. So you have to be able to see it. And the microscope really changed everything. Once the microscope was developed, it kept improving and improving and improving. And we can see farther and farther and farther into the tiny world, the world of the cell, because of the microscope. Now, we've talked about this spontaneous generation. So scientists agreed that living things were made of cells, but they didn't know where those cells came from. And remember, there was a time when they thought those cells just spontaneously appeared on non-living matter. So we learned about Redi. Remember Francesco Redi, how he experimented with that gauze over a jar that was filled with meat. We also talked about Pasteur. Louis Pasteur didn't think spontaneous generation was true. So he did this experiment. Let's watch this quick video just so you can see what his experiment was.
Pasteur added nutrient broth to flasks, bent the necks of the flasks into S shapes, and then boiled the broth to kill any existing microbes. After the broth had been sterilized, Pasteur broke off the swan necks from some of the flasks, exposing the nutrient broth within them to air from above. The remaining flasks were left intact. Over time, dust particles from the air fell into the broken flasks, but in the intact flasks, dust particles remained near the tip of the swan necks. They were unable to travel against gravity into the flasks. The broth in the broken flasks quickly became cloudy, a sign that it teemed with microbial life. However, the broth in the unbroken flasks remained clear. Without the introduction of dust on which microbes can travel, no life arose. Pasteur thus refuted the notion of spontaneous generation.
Okay, so over time, the cell theory was developed because of the work of some of these scientists. Now, a theory, remember we've talked about theory before. A theory is a set of explanations that's well tested, that's well accepted, that explains about something. So the cell theory tells us what cells are. And this one is really important when we talk about life science. So I want to look at each part of this cell theory right here. So let's look at this first one. All living things are composed of cells. So there's two more scientists, Schleiden and Schwann, and they were the ones who discovered that all parts of animals and plants are made of cells. All living things are composed of cells. Wait a minute. Can you guys think of any exceptions to that? Can you think of something that's living that's not made of cells? What about a virus? Viruses are not made of cells. Are they alive? What do you think? Yes or no? Let me tell you this, no matter which way you vote, yes or no, you'll have some scientists who agree with you. There are some scientists who think that we need to rewrite this part of the cell theory because they think that viruses are living things. But as of now, they are not considered living things because we still accept the cell theory. Now, part of the reason that it took scientists a long time to believe that all parts of living things are made of cells is that cells look a lot different from each other. So look at these. Having all these different types of cells in just one organism can be really helpful for the organism. You know, after all, since there's a lot of different kinds of cells, they can be very good at what they do. A red blood cell does not have to carry nerves. It doesn't have to carry messages like that. A muscle cell doesn't have to fight infection. White blood cells do that. White blood cells don't have to build bone to make you have a bony structure. So these are important tasks that things do. So red blood cells are going to carry oxygen. Neurons, which is what we call a nerve cell, they carry messages between the brain and the body. These epithelial cells, which are skin cells, provide protection. The white blood cells fight against invaders. Bone cells provide support, and smooth muscle cells, well, all muscle cells provide movement. But the fact that we had all these different kinds of cells was confusing to the first scientists. So from the time of the ancient Romans up until the late 19th century, people thought some life forms could spontaneously generate. Essentially, they thought they came from decaying matter. So this is pretty funny. There was a recipe in the 17th century that said, if you wanted to make mice, all you had to do to make a mouse was to place sweaty underwear and husks of wheat in a jar that didn't have a lid on it. If you waited for about 21 days, the sweat from the underwear would penetrate the wheat and change it into mice. So we can pretty easily figure out what happened. Mice found their way into the jar, right? And it looked like they came from nothing. Now that seems funny to us now. We laugh at an idea like that. But the society at the time thought that was true. So it didn't surprise them. So our friend Francesco, he was the one who made the very first attack on the idea of spontaneous generation. But do you think that his experiment ended the idea of spontaneous generation? You think once he and Pasteur put out their work, people went, oh, okay, there's no spontaneous generation anymore? No, Hibba says no. No, you're right. People continued to believe it. So what about when the microscope came along? Do you think that being able to see those tiny things under the microscope finally put an end to the idea of spontaneous generation? No, it still didn't. It actually hurt the idea. It made it look like there was this whole new world of microorganisms that appeared to come from nowhere. They quickly learned that in order to create these little animalcules, which is what they called them, all you needed to do was put water in hay and wait for a few days and then look at them under the microscope and you could see them. Now, it actually continued for a couple hundred years before finally this whole idea of spontaneous generation was put to an end. And now we know, as part 2 of the cell theory says, all cells have to come from cells that were existing before. And then the third, cell theory says, part 3 says cells carry out the functions needed to support life. So think about all the things that an organism has to do to stay alive. Think about all the things your body has to do just to stay alive. All those things happen because of cells. You have to break down food in order to give your body a source of energy. What else do you have to do? Besides breaking down food, what else does your body have to do to stay alive?
Breathe air.
You have to take in air. Yep, we've got to get oxygen in order to fuel the energy producing process. Without oxygen, your cells can't make energy and you die quickly. Hannah.
Our brain needs to like control our body so that our blood cells can move and all that.
Yep. Without all the nervous activity that comes from the brain to all the different parts of the body, they wouldn't know what to do. Your muscles couldn't move if they weren't being told by the brain. Well, most of them, some of them do. You've got some muscle activity that doesn't involve the brain, but yeah, good. Any other thoughts? What if you couldn't get rid of your waste products? What if as your body made carbon dioxide, it just stuck in your body and you couldn't breathe it out? You've got to have a way to get rid of the waste products. You've got to have a way to filter your blood to make it clean. And that's what your kidneys do. You have to have a way to get rid of the parts of your food that you don't need. So you have to be able to defecate them out. You have to be able to get waste products out. You have to be able to fight against foreign cells like bacteria that might get in or other harmful molecules. And you have to have a way to fix things. When things break, when you get a cut, you have to have a way to repair it. You have to have a way to make new cells. So these are all the things that a cell has to do. And it is the cell that does them all. Cells do all these things. That means they carry out the functions that are needed to support life. Now, if we took all the cells in the world and we put them into 2 categories, they can go into 2 categories. One category, those cells have a nucleus inside them and some organelles that have membranes around them. The other category does not. Anybody remember what those are called? It was in a lesson you had in the very first week. 2 kinds of cells. One has a nucleus, the other does not. Mohammed.
I think eukaryotics have the cell
Yep,
and the
that's one of 'em.
prokaryotics don't have cells.
That's right. Very good. Very good. So eukaryotic ones are ones that do have a nucleus. The nucleus holds the genetic material and directs the activity of the cell. They also have these other organelles that we're going to talk about in a minute. Prokaryotic cells do not. These are 2 words that it would be good for you to remember. Write those down in your notebook and try to remember those cells. We'll talk about them a lot. You are a eukaryote. That's how I remember that. You are a eukaryote. You have eukaryotic cells. So a cell that is prokaryotic tends to be unicellular, and it does have DNA. You can see the DNA here, but the DNA is not inside a nucleus. So let's take a look at some of the things that both of those have. So let's zoom in on the eukaryotic cells first. The first lesson this week is about the organelles inside a cell. You'll get to that tomorrow. So let's look at the eukaryotic cell because it has organelles. So this is what we call a typical animal cell. Now remember that picture back where I showed you all the different kinds of cells that we have? So clearly they don't all look exactly like that one, but this one is what we call the typical animal cell. And this one is a typical plant cell. Now look at all the stuff that's inside there. And when you look at pictures like this, it makes it look like, okay, let's look at the ribosome. That's this one right here. It makes it look like there's only 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 free ribosomes floating around it here. There's actually hundreds or thousands of them inside a cell. Same with plant cell. There's lots of things in there. So let's take a look at what a cell is made of. And let's do that by like putting together our own cell. We're going to assemble one. So we have to start with a border, something on the outside, like a barrier to keep things in and to keep things out. Now, the basic job of this barrier is going to be to protect the cell from everything around it. We call this the cell membrane. Sometimes it's called the plasma membrane. Now you'll see that. Now that cell membrane is the outer boundary of a cell, and it controls what goes in the cell and what leaves. So think about your house. What part of your house acts like a cell membrane? Hiba.
Like your door kind of, and like the walls as well.
Yeah, excellent. Because the walls of your house keep things out, but the door lets things in, right? Think like if you think of a part of a city too, think about maybe there's a fence or a wall around the city that keeps things from, we don't really wall our cities off anymore, but throughout most of history, people did. They built walls around their cities, and that might, you can, maybe a fence around a yard. Okay, a lot of you probably have a fence around your yard. So a fence is going to keep the big mean dogs from coming into your yard, but unfortunately it's going to let the mosquitoes get right in. But our cell does a pretty good job of keeping things in that should be in and keeping things out that should be out, but it also lets things pass. And one way it does that is by actually wrapping its membrane around the thing. You can see that in this picture. The cell needs to bring this green particle in, so it wraps its membrane around and brings it right into the cell. Watch this little really short video about the cell membrane. Remember, plasma membrane and cell membranes are the same thing.
Between the living machinery of the inner cell and the harsh conditions of the outside world stands the cell's plasma membrane. As crucial as this barrier is, it's surprisingly flexible. Push it and watch it move. Poke hard enough and it might break and begin to regroup. The lipid molecules of the membrane naturally assemble in a double layer because their tails repel water as their heads attract it.
So that's what the membrane of all the cells in your body is like. And what's really cool is that all the little organelles inside, they have membranes too, and they're the same. It's exactly the same kind of membrane around a mitochondria that you have around your whole cell. The vacuoles, the Golgi apparatus, the lysosomes, they all have the same kind of membrane. That way they can fuse with the outer membrane and become a part of it when something needs to be released. The membrane can wrap around and create these vacuoles in order to bring things in when they need to. Now there are a couple ribosomes, centrioles right here. So the cytoskeleton is not made of a plasma membrane. There's another structure that a plant has that's not made of a plasma membrane, that is outside the plasma membrane, and that's called a cell wall. So we'll talk a lot about cell walls when we get to talking about plants later, but the cell wall makes a plant cell pretty hard. Have you ever noticed that your skin feels a lot softer than the leaf of a plant? That's because the cell in the plant has this outer hard structure around the outside. It makes it rigid. You don't have that cell wall around yours. And the cell wall is clear so that the light can get right through because you have these organelles called chloroplasts that produce food for the cell. All right, again, we'll talk about that when we talk about plants in the second semester. So you've got your cell membrane on the outside, this double layer, really cool plasma membrane that lets some things in and lets other things out, but not everything. What's it protecting? What's on the inside of all that? Well, there's this thick kind of sticky fluid-like substance and a bunch of little things that are inside there. So the fluid is called cytosol, and it holds the organelles in place. The cytosol, which is the fluid, it's about the consistency of honey. It plus the organelles is what we call cytoplasm. So mostly cytoplasm is water, and it has some chemicals that are dissolved in it that make it kind of thick. All right, now as I'm talking about all this, remember, every single cell, all those trillions of cells in your body, they're all like this. They all have this cool membrane. They all have the liquid inside them, the cytosol inside them, and the organelles inside it. And we know that because our microscopes have gotten better and better, and we can see down to the really tiny level. All right, in the nucleus, or inside that cytoplasm that we have there, you've got a nucleus. So we've got this cell and all these parts in it. Somebody has to be in control, right? Somebody has to be in charge. Well, the nucleus is the one that does the job. It's the biggest organelle, and it controls the cell's function. So remember those two kinds of cells, the eukaryote and prokaryote? A eukaryote has a nucleus, eukaryotic cells. And here's what a nucleus does. A nucleus is the control center. It has the DNA, or the genetic material, inside it. All right, now let's take a look at the organelles. The nucleus is the biggest one in almost all cells. It holds the genetic material, but as you can see, there's a lot more. So I'm just going to go over some of the really important ones for you now. This one is pretty powerful. It's called the powerhouse of the cell, the mighty mitochondria. If you can keep that in your head, mighty mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. So it breaks down food and gives you energy. Try to imagine what you'd be like if all the energy, if all your mitochondria just stopped working. If all of a sudden you couldn't make any energy at all. I mean, it wouldn't be long before death would occur. Those mitochondria are really, really important. So can you think of a kind of a cell in your body, a type of cell that needs a lot of energy? A lot of energy. Okay, here you go. You're running away from a big, mean animal that's chasing you down the street. Felicity.
Red blood cells? I mean,
Red blood cells do need some
White blood
energy.
I meant
But there's one that requires a ton of energy, one kind of cell.
I meant white blood cells.
White blood cells too. There isn't a cell that doesn't, put it that way. They all do require energy. Mohammed.
Brain cells.
Brain cells require a lot of energy. Yep, they do. Muscle cells require a lot of energy. Yeah. Let's think about your heart in general. Your heart is made of muscle. It's a special kind of muscle. Any guess how many mitochondria there might be inside one heart cell? Guess a number.
50.
More.
100.
More.
300.
More.
1 million.
No, less. That's too big a jump.
1,000.
More than 1,000.
3,000.
More than 3,000. Less than 8.
7,000.
Less than 7.
6,000.
Yeah, Leah's got it. Good guess, Leah. There's about 5,000 mitochondria inside every one of the cells in your heart. So once again, these pictures make it look like there's a couple, but there's 5,000 in one heart cell. Now, obviously, heart muscle cells need a lot of energy. So they're going to have a lot of the organelle that makes that energy. Pretty cool. All right. Another kind of organelle that we have inside the cell is called, how's that for a name? Endoplasmic reticulum. I think they could have come up with a little easier name for that. But it is like you can think of the endoplasmic reticulum as being like a highway. It moves things around inside the cell. And there's two kinds. One kind has what we call ribosomes. It's dotted. You can see those right there. Another kind doesn't. The rough ones are rough because they have ribosomes on them. The smooth ones are smooth because they don't. Okay, then what's a ribosome? Well, these little dots are ribosomes. And they look kind of a little bit, you know, like they're not a lot, like they don't do a lot. They're so tiny. But these actually make protein. Ribosomes make their little protein factories. We'll learn as we go through our course that protein, so all living things are made of cells. What does the work of a cell? Protein. Almost always. Proteins do almost every single job that needs to be done inside a cell. So how important do you think ribosomes are? Pretty important. They take the particles from the food that you eat and they rearrange those particles into the kind of proteins that the cell needs in order to do its job. So those are pretty important little structures. But then we've got these things that are made. We've got proteins that are made inside the cell. We got to move them from one part of the cell to another. Sometimes we have to move them out of the cell altogether. Sometimes we have to move other things in. Well, there's Golgi apparatus is the thing that does that. Now, you know why it's called Golgi? Because the guy who discovered it in a cell, his last name was Golgi. So if you go on to discover something inside a cell, you can name it after yourself. Just don't name it something like endoplasmic reticulum. That's too hard to remember. All right. So the Golgi apparatus is, think of that as like the post office of the cell. It packages things. Those proteins that were made by the ribosome, it packages them up and moves them around inside the cell or to release them on the outside. Sometimes, though, there are things inside a cell that need to be taken care of. They need to be gotten rid of. That's where lysosomes come in. So it's a digestive center for proteins. It's a place where things are broken down. Protein, fat, carbohydrate, waste products. It has enzymes inside it that are digestive, that are going to destroy things. So if that lysosome breaks open and all of those enzymes pour out into the cell, it kills the cell. The cell has to die. Now, the lysosome, most of the time, they don't break, but sometimes they do. Sometimes they break on purpose. If the cell knows it's sick and it isn't functioning right, it will cause its own lysosomes to release these enzymes and destroy itself so that it can't cause more harm to the body. Pretty cool. Then we have these little storage containers inside. So these are just a place where things are stored. Sometimes water, sometimes there can be these little tiny vesicles and vacuoles. Now this says found only in plants. There's a big one that's found only in plants called the central vacuole, but we do have vesicles and vacuoles inside animal cells too. All right, those are some of the really important ones. You're going to learn about more in the lesson tomorrow, but that's kind of a basic. We will talk about these different organelles as we continue to move through our course. Just remember, a eukaryote is the organism. Eukaryotic is the kind of cell. So a eukaryote, like you, has eukaryotic cells. Remember also what a eukaryote is. It can be multicellular or unicellular. It has a nucleus. You are a eukaryote. You have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Usually eukaryotes are larger and more complex than prokaryotes are, and they have more stuff that's inside. Things like animals and plants and fungi and protists. And here's a couple pictures. Here's a couple of examples. All right, real quickly, I'm going to rush through now because I want to do a Kahoot. You guys want to do a Kahoot? Yeah, so be ready. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about prokaryotes so you're ready for that part of the Kahoot. So a prokaryote is a tiny little, usually one-celled organism. So they are unicellular microorganisms, micro being so small they can't be seen without a microscope. They do not have a nucleus. They do not have membrane-bound organelles. They're usually smaller than eukaryotes, and they're very simple. So things like bacteria are examples. You can see one right here. This is a prokaryotic cell. Now look, it does have a DNA in there, but the DNA is just loose inside the cell. It does not have its DNA inside a nucleus. And usually they are much smaller. Here you can see like a comparison. Usually eukaryotic cells are about 10 times bigger than the prokaryotic cells are. All right, let's skip ahead and do our Kahoot. All right, so let's see here. What do we have time for? All right, let's do this one. Cell types of cells. Okay, hold on, that didn't work. Because I was logged out. I took too long to get here. Okay, here we go. www.kahoot.it, or you can scan the QR code here. So once you are at www.kahoot.it, the game pin is 348370. 348370. James was ready. All right. Cookie. Who's Cookie? We could do process of elimination here. Hannah, are you Cookie? Deja? Hiba? Hiba, do you have a question, or is your hand up for because you're Cookie?
I'm Cookie.
Okay. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm gonna start the game. If you're not in yet, this game pin will be down here at the bottom. But we've only got 4 minutes left, so I want to get as many of these as we can. All right, we're going to talk about the cell theory and the types of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Okay, what is the basic unit of structure and function in living things? That's the third part of the cell theory. The cell. The cell is the basic unit of structure and function. All right, I'm going to go through this quickly. Which invention contributed to the discovery of cells? It is the microscope. Well done, everybody. All right, James is in the lead, not Kian, and Mohammed not far behind. Which scientist was the first to use a simple microscope to observe living bacteria and protozoa? You remember? The first one to see living animals, living bacteria and protozoa. Oh, that was Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Most of you guys got that. Question 4. What scientist coined the term cells because they reminded him of tiny rooms in a monastery? He's the one who looked at cork and he saw those little squares and called them cells. That was Robert Hooke. Hooke named the cell the cell. Which of the following is not part of the cell theory? You have a little longer for this one, 20 seconds. Pick the one that's not part of the cell theory. It is. Eukaryotic cells are produced from prokaryotic cells. That is not part of the cell theory. Question 6. New cells are only produced from existing cells. True or false? It is true. That is true. Plants, animals, and fungi and protists are all made of eukaryotic. Remember, you are a eukaryote. You are an animal. You are a eukaryote. You are made of cells that have a nucleus. What is the large membrane enclosed structure that contains genetic material in a cell? What do we call the part of the cell that has the genetic material inside it? Called the stuffed DNA. That is the nucleus. The nucleus has the genetic material. All right, we'll do 2 more. Despite differences in size and shape, at some point all cells have a cell membrane and DNA. Not all have mitochondria. Remember, prokaryotic cells don't, and animal cells don't have cell walls. Only plant cells do. So the correct answer is DNA. All right, this is going to be the last question. All cells have a cell membrane, but only plant cells have a what? Only plant cells have a cell wall. All right, I'm gonna have to end the game. Let's end the Kahoot now and let's see how we did. In third place, we have Felicity. In second place, Aaliyah. Who got first? Let's see. All right, James. Well done, well done. All right, oh, Cookie and Muhammad are our runners up today. So good job, everybody. Most of you answered most of the questions correctly, so that's wonderful. Anybody have any questions? All right, as you're reading through your lesson tomorrow, really marvel at yourself. You are made of all these cells. Every living thing is made of at least one cell. So you're made of a lot of them, and they're all very cool. All right, have a great week, everybody. I'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye.